at Strata-g Labor Solutions, who's going to guide us through this conversation. Justin, thank you so much for making time for us. Good morning.
Good morning, Clement, and thanks for the opportunity to talk to you and the listeners.
Yeah, let's look at what just the laws say about the hiring of foreign nationals. What are the essential documents that employers must request from foreign nationals to verify their eligibility to work in South Africa? Maybe we can start there.
Yes, absolutely. So I think the starting point is we need to look at what governs the requirements for working in South Africa legally, and then we look at Section 38 of the Immigration Act, and that talks about not hiring a illegal foreigner and also not hiring people who are not authorized to be employed in that particular company. So what you would then need is obviously a valid passport that hasn't expired, and then also your valid work permit, which needs to obviously then be issued by Home Affairs.
Oh, okay. And then what about the verification of the documents themselves? Because, and I'm sure you've seen, Justin, that people can find fake documents that almost look legit. They can submit that to the employer, and the employer being none the wiser thinks these are legitimate documentation, when in fact, upon investigation much later, you realize that these are not authentic at all. And I know that's, some employers don't have the resources to constantly check, whether these documents are authentic. But how can they be extra careful so that they don't end up, being dragged into that drama should there be an investigation?
Yes. So ultimately, as you said, I mean, everyone can obviously get an invalid work permit. But now what you could do is actually approach a verification agency that could assist you for a nominal fee, and then they will do the legwork running up and down between, Home Affairs and any sort of embassy that they need to speak to then verify the veracity of those documents and make sure that they are valid and that they have been issued through the proper channels.
Okay. Let's look at now the hiring. So once they've got, the right documentation, they submit that. What are the things that employers must consider? Maybe take us through the crucial labor laws that govern the hiring of foreign nationals. Under what circumstances can foreign nationals be hired in any sector?
Yes. So when you hire a foreign national, you would then obviously need to see what the terms and conditions of their visa are, what it allows them to participate in, and then make sure you comply with that. Also, as we know, what happens with a work permit is it is usually valid for a specified period, and then in order to now avoid having any sort of repercussions at a later stage, it's always recommended that employers place them on a fixed-term contract, which is then tied to the validity of that particular work permit. Because ultimately what happens is a lot of people seem to think that because someone is a foreign national or even a legal foreign national working in South Africa, you can sidestep the labor law. But when that employment sort of ends and that work permit is no longer valid, they are still an employee for the purposes of the Labour Relations Act. They are still afforded the same rights and protections.
And we live in a country where we have seen, even in certain sectors, the Department of Employment and Labor has been conducting raids, for instance, and making arrests together with the police in the restaurant sector, among others. So there are a lot of people in restaurants across the country that have been, pointed out and flagged for violating the provisions of the Immigration Act by failing to produce the requisite documentation. But often we don't focus a lot on asking the employers themselves, why did you decide to go for these particular foreign nationals? In other words, non-critical skills. What role does that play in the hiring process? Are employers allowed to hire foreigners for non-critical skill posts?
Yes, so absolutely. What we need to then distinguish between is there is a critical skills visa and then there's also a work permit. Now, the critical skills visa is someone that is on the list where government is requiring these skills for the National Infrastructure Project, and they wouldn't necessarily need a job already to be able to apply for that visa and have it valid. A general work permit allows you to come into the country and work, provided that you have already secured employment. So there is that distinction.
Okay, and then with the work visa, if you get that permit, does that give you permission to sort of like work in anywhere in any sector?
Yeah, so usually it will then allow you to do general work in any sector, but sometimes there are restrictions placed on it. Sometimes you'll have something like an investment visa or a mining permit or whatever it might be that would then say, well, your status is only for this particular industry. But in terms of critical skills, that is different to the general work permit.
What about temporary visas? Can foreign nationals be hired on temporary visas?
Well, a temporary visa, as I said, it's usually for something like a sports trip. It would be usually for something like a, just tourism or, coming through to a event. And so you wouldn't be then permitted to then work on that type of visa.
Okay. 17 minutes now after 11 o'clock. When we come back, we'll go straight to your calls and your WhatsApps on 011-883-0702. Isa at Strata-g Labor Solutions. I want to hear from you as well, though. So let's start with you, Yelang, calling us from Ferndale. Good morning.
Good morning, Clement. Good morning, Justin. Thank you for a really insightful show. Justin, I just want to highlight the fact that in the academic realm, there are more foreign nationals occupying posts. So whether it be your lecturers, your professors, those who are in that world. My question to you is, how then do you deal with the anti-foreign national sentiment that is now gripping South Africa? Because these are professions that may not be critical per se, but South Africans do not have an appetite for based on research. So how then do those people who fill those posts deal with the anti-foreign sentiment that is prevalent in the country?
All right, Yelang, thank you so much for that. I'll get Justin to respond to that in a moment. Here's a WhatsApp voice note that's also come through.
Good morning, Clem, and all 702 lenders. Yeah, Clem, I wanted to know about when it comes also to asylum. Asylum, it's written work and study. Which worker should be those ones? The one which is stating in asylum, which says work and study, which is a document. When you apply for a job, it means you are qualified to get a job because it's written there, say work and study. So thanks for the good show. I would like to know about that, to make a public know about that also. Thanks, man. It's Kamis here in 4 ways.
Thank you, Kamis. Okay, Justin, Kamis wants to know about asylum seekers. What are the limitations there? And Yelang was asking just about, sometimes you've got these professors who are holding these critical posts, and there is sometimes this anti-foreigner sentiment coming even from some of their colleagues. And I wonder how employers can deal with that. Is it better to over-communicate and explain so that you don't leave a vacuum where now people are going to make up their minds about whether or not people should have occupied the positions they occupy?
No, 100%. So I would agree with that. I mean, it's always better to over-communicate than under-communicate, because if everyone is talking, we understand what the requirements are, we understand why this person is here, and what value they bring. I mean, ultimately, when you go and you look overseas for a foreign national and you get this particular professor that's going to come and fill this post, it's because they're highly regarded and it's because they are an expert in their field. So I think that's just basically the way to deal with it.
Yeah.
Once people understand why the person is there and the value they add, I think then we can start dealing with that anti-foreign national sentiment.
Yeah. And then the question on asylum?
Yeah, so with asylum seekers, it does allow you to study and it does allow you to work, and ultimately you are then entitled to, work in any sort of industry which you meet the skills for.
Okay. Here's another WhatsApp voice note.
Good morning. In terms of your current discussion, to my knowledge, you can't get a work permit anymore. And that I've heard from by the mouths of some Zimbabweans that tried to get a work permit. I obviously didn't follow it through to the relevant parliament or party or organization, but what is the status in terms of obtaining a work permit? Speaking to Zarius. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Zarius. Justin, in fact, I do remember I've gotten a few calls and messages on the show from some Zimbabwean nationals as well who have been struggling to even renew their work permits or and I don't know what the process is like, but they've been struggling with just getting their work permits. I would imagine these are people who wanted to either extend or renew them. And if you're aware of that, you can help us. But what's been the story there?
So ultimately, yes, Zimbabweans can still work in South Africa and they can still get the